Where did these names come from? What is this? You know, it was a feel.
And then I looked around.
But what were these songs about? Old 78s, often poorly recorded on the road, telling of experiences and feelings that were totally alien to the Thames Delta, were sometimes difficult to comprehend.
Those of us who struggled, like the Rolling Stones probably did a few years before we did, to try and decipher the words and couldn't figure out what some of them were from these recordings, we would kind of make up other words that seemed to fit.
What did he say? Didn't quite get that. Didn't jot that down, you know. And there was madness.
Yeah, lyrics were sometimes difficult, and we found that with Little Richard as well. And my mother trying to slow the record down to try and hear what he was saying, and couldn't work it out. She used to come up with some funny ideas about what they were. But yes, yeah, eventually your ear tunes in.
But when they did tune in, what they heard was often darkly humorous and emotionally deep. Poetic tales of lives untouched by either lipstick or collars.
The main charm about the blues is that it has such an authenticity about it, the fact that when you listen to it, you hear these stories and you can visualise that these are real stories.
When you were seeing John Lee Hooker, you believe what he was telling you, because he was talking about the Great Fire of Natchez, which he experienced when I think his girlfriend died there, and the flood of Tupelo, Mississippi. They were real things that happened in his life.
I mean, Joe Turner, for instance, is a big favourite of mine, and he would be singing things like, "My baby's gone, she ain't coming back, she's lower than a snake, crawling down in a wagon track." I mean, it's so heavy, you know. You think, what a great image, you know.
Elmo James, the sky is crying, look at the tears roll down the streets. I mean, that's fantastic. Muddy Waters, I'm going down to Louisiana, somewhere behind the sun. It's magical stuff.
Someone like Sleepy John Estes, where he says, "Get away from my window, quit scratching on my screen." He's turned his girlfriend into sort of a wild animal, kind of ripping on the door, you know.
If you're a 15 or 16-year-old kid, you're hearing some words and phrases and implications. And that's what made it not just sexy, I think it made it kind of erotic, because we knew sort of there's something going on here, even though we didn't know the references and the slang expressions.
These blues men, they're talking about getting laid. And there's me studying what they're doing, but I ain't getting laid. I mean, I've something missing in my life. I have to, obviously, you know, to be a blues man, I have to go and see what this lemon juice is running down your leg. And, you know, these guys are actually living a life. They're not studying, they're not blah, blah, they just are. And they say, how do you become what is?
Being a blues disciple in late 50s Britain was like being a part of a hip Masonic lodge, a society so secret that even its own members were sometimes ignorant of each other's existence.
It was like the sort of formation of a solar system, you know, the dust gathers together and stars form and all that sort of thing. Suddenly you realise, yes, there is someone who lives near you who's got a record by Freddie King or someone like that, you know.
You know, if you heard someone blew a harmonica in Ealing, you were there, you know, or someone had an album that you didn't, you'd go to Claygate or whatever it was. It was like sort of Night of the Living Dead, people sort of migrating to whoever had this thing that you'd been turned on to, you know.
Someone had given me the address of someone who'd got a Muddy Waters album, probably got the bus over to Tooting. And I knocked on the door at sort of 6:30 in the evening. And this guy appears from the back and I said, "Have you got a Muddy Waters album?" And he said, "Yeah." I said, "Could I see it?" And he brought it out and showed it to me, and I said, "Could I hold it?"
Some very funny people with record collections. The things you'd have to do to get in, you know, I mean, let alone get out.
It was like, oh, you got that, or you got this, and I'll come around and listen to it. And, you know, we didn't have tape recorders then and stuff, so it was like you went around and listened to it.
I knew Brian Jones, but he mostly bought guitar records, whereas I mostly bought harmonica records. We would sort of, share listening to them.
Brian Jones, big collector, big record collector, and that's one of the reasons I hit on him in the first place.
There were definitely like our versions of Tupperware meetings.
Yeah, you would stick guys up if you found their record collection. You are going to stay down there right now while I call through. He got like that,
Oddly enough, for a younger generation in love with the blues, Britain was the perfect place to be. Trad jazz, which also originated from the southern states of America, had stormed the UK in the late 50s. But popular trombonist and band leader Chris Barber had a passion for the blues as well.
He was fortunate to have a successful band and to be in a position financially where he could do what he wanted to do. And so he did what he wanted, which was to bring over blues and gospel performers. Some people always sit back and wait for things to happen and wait for the right time, but he just said, "To hell with that, I'm going to do it."
Big names in American blues and R&B. And he brought them all over to this country.
Gonna lay down.
I think 57 was the first with Sister Rosetta Tharpe. And then Muddy Waters in 58, Sonny Terry Brownie McGee in 58, and going on right into the 60s, brought Muddy back again, Howling Wolf, Sonny Boy Williamson, Louis Jordan, all kinds. I mean, just, for him, it was just, he wanted to play with those people. He wanted to hear them right there, playing in front of his rhythm section,
So that's what we wanted to get in with the real folk. We were helping us to play the blues and jazz better. We want these people to help give us the ingredient that we know about, but we aren't sure if we're getting it right. We want to get it righter.
When the legends of American blues first stepped out onto the British stage in the late 50s, thanks to Barber's own money and determination, the audience that faced them was entirely white, well-educated and well-intentioned. It was all shirts and ties and ban the bomb badges.
Man, slow down, don't walk so fast.
Jazz and folk disciples, not rabid rock and rollers.
To be honest, there was always a slightly sort of middle-classness about that sort of audience, and they also tended to come out of a sort of slightly left-wing side of politics.
It must have helped that we were, I wouldn't say reverent, but we were obviously caring about playing the music in a genuine way, as a genuine expression.
We really owe this enormous debt to a music that is utterly alien to our experience. Maybe that's why it didn't appeal to black folks living in the UK at the time, because it wasn't a black experience that they knew of. Few black Americans settled in the UK. It was obviously mostly people from Caribbean or black Asians.
The younger rock and roll audience wanted to sing the blues electric, something the more purist Chris Barber Jazz Club crowd wasn't quite prepared for. But it was already a reality. When Muddy Waters first came to Britain in 1958, he plugged in a Fender Telecaster. Established audiences here, reared on out-of-date records and quaint ideas of the blues as a rural black folk music, were crestfallen.
Some purists in the audience objected because they wanted him to come out and sound like the country boy that they'd heard on records, playing rural cotton patch blues. They had to consider what the audience wanted. So when they heard this cry for "Where's the acoustic guitar?" they went away and thought about it.
So 2 years go by and he comes back again and he brings an acoustic guitar. By then everyone wants to hear him play the amplified Telecaster because it's moved on, it's 1962, 63 and everyone's listening to that sort of music.
Memphis Slim was on that bill, and I took them. I think I took them back to the hotel. Either I took them back in my car, or we went back on the bus together. And I was sitting in the lounge of the hotel with Muddy and Memphis Slim, and Muddy was saying, "Well, you know, I don't know what they want. What do they? You know, what do people want?"
Certain English people, there was an idea that you had to be black and wear dungarees and play acoustic guitar, and that meant you were playing blues. If you plugged it in, no, I'm sorry, you sinned.
People in England had a certain stereotyped idea of what a black folk musician should be like. When you see pictures of Big Bill Broonzy in the 30s, and he is just so sharp.